Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Immersive Podcast. It's your host, Tyler, and I am coming to you from Glastonbury, UK. So, pardon the lack of massive eyeball background behind me. We are moving around this month. I have a very special person with me today that I was looking so much forward to talking to. She's recently picking up a little bit of steam. I'm seeing her on the interwebs a little bit more. Karen is her name. She's a clairvoyant and a channel. She channels a being called Sarai, and I don't want to speak entirely for her. So, how are you doing today, Karen?
I'm great, Tyler. Thank you so much for having me. I always smile now when people say my name is Karen, and I always feel like I have to point out that I'm very nice. So, because of that meme that went
Yeah,
around. So, we'll just tack that on. I'm a nice Karen.
a nice Karen. And where am I speaking to you from today? Where are you in the
I live
States?
in Ontario, Canada.
Oh, okay, yeah,
No, I live in Ontario,
Ontario.
Canada. So, yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I recently, and of course, shout out to Alex Ferrari. I think I saw you on Next Level Soul podcast. I think he titled one of the things like Canada's top channel or something like that. I think I actually saw a headline of something of that sort.
He
Um,
did.
that was
He
pretty. So
did call me
congrats to
Canada's.
that. That's a
Thank
it's a
you.
pretty good little
He did.
accolade.
I guess it is. I
Absolutely.
was thinking about it after, and I was like, it's not really like being called Canada's
Not
top hockey player. Like, it's
right.
not like, okay, you're Canada's top hockey player. Like, that would be like, whoa, she's Canada's top hockey player. But,
Yeah, and
it's a
channeling.
little bit of a smaller pond with the
Is it a
channeling, the
contest
channelers.
even? I don't
Yeah,
know if it's
that's
a
the thing. It's not a
contest,
contest. No, it's
right?
not a contest.
No. So, you've told your background story a fair bit over the years, and shout out to my producer Jane. She interviewed you some time ago. I just think on an Instagram Live or something to that degree, but just
Mhm.
a little bit on the background and such. How long have you been channeling, and when did you come to really come to terms with the being that you call Sarai?
Yeah, so it's been a journey that's kind of taken place over many years. So it wasn't like I just started channeling overnight. It really started many years ago. Like I'm talking 20 years ago. And I was a makeup artist at the time, right? So I
Okay.
wasn't into this whole world at all. I would say that I was spiritually minded. I always have been.
Hmm.
But I was working as a makeup artist. And so how it started was I would notice that when I was doing people's makeup, that I was receiving what I now know are psychic impressions. So that's kind of how it started very subtly, is that I started having psychic experiences. And then over the years, that just progressed and progressed and progressed. So then I started having mediumistic experiences. So interacting with loved ones in the spirit world. And then the channeling started around 2017, 2018, when I started meditating every day. I was going through a bit of a rough time because I just had my son. I had a lot of postpartum stuff.
Okay.
And so one of the things I did to alleviate some of what I was experiencing was I just was like, okay, now's the time. I'm going to
Yeah.
start meditating every day, right? Because up until that point, it was kind of hit or miss, right? As it is with meditation sometimes.
Tends to be the way it seems with
Yeah, right.
most.
We're kind of interested in it. We don't take it seriously. But I was at a point in
Yeah.
my life where I'm like, okay, I have to take this seriously because I had a lot of postpartum anxiety after giving birth to my son. So
Kudos to you for going to meditation for that and sticking through with it. I mean, I
well,
identify with that. Yeah.
it was kind of, to me, it was like, okay, this is the only option unless I'm wanting to, my doctor was giving me prescriptions and stuff. And I was like,
Yeah,
not really into that. So anyways,
of
it ended
course.
up being a blessing because when I started meditating, within about, I would say 2 or 3 months, I started being aware of this energy on my left. And I didn't recognize it as a being at first. It was just like a beautiful, I would see it in my mind's eye as like a blue orb. And I would feel really at peace when it was beside me. And so as time progressed, as the months went by, I became aware that, oh, okay, this is a being. And I started to having experiences with her in the same way that I was having experiences with the spirit world. So it's kind of this mediumistic type of experience where I was receiving energy and information. I was starting to write things down. So then that just progressed. And then, as time went on, I started vocally channeling her, which was a surprise as well. It wasn't really something that I was planning on doing. It was just
Right.
something, this entire journey has just been a bit of a surprise to me, and just this continued unfoldment, evolution, and then here we are.
Yeah,
And
and
I'm
then here
channeling
we
her,
are. Yeah, absolutely.
right? So
That all it sounds. I mean, in just your energy right now and how you explain it, it all sounds so very. While it's inherently somewhat of a fringe topic, it all sounds so very nonchalant,
yeah,
laissez-faire, and just real and authentic. The way you're explaining it, it's refreshing to hear that. It's just like any other skill that people develop. That's a little more mainstream and a little less, I guess, fringe, if you want to say, like than channeling, etc.
yeah.
Developed over time. It makes perfect sense to me that it would start with psychic impressions and develop into exactly the way that you explained it. Of course, I understand people having that download, that kind of almost walk-in type of experience overnight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the way you've just described it is very, very much very human,
Mm-hmm.
very much the way that humans do things. And I mean, that's okay. Sometimes we like to, call ourselves star seeds, and we might all be star seeds. We might all be part of this massive galactic history. But in the here, in the now, in this timeline, yeah, I'm functioning as a human. I'm aware of
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Nah,
I
I
think
just
that's a
really
good
liked
thing
that answer.
to keep in mind, right? Like we may have all of our different connections in other realms
Hmm.
of reality, right? But ultimately, from our soul's perspective, we're here to experience life as a human. So we
Have
also want
that.
to keep that in mind and like
Yeah.
focus on, what am I here to, not only, people are always focused on what am I here to do, but what am I here to experience? That's a
Yeah.
big one. So
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So, are you able to maybe bring in Sarai and channel her today for us and maybe answer some
yeah,
questions, etc.?
for
Is
sure.
that something that you'd like to do?
Yeah, for sure. Just give me
Okay.
a couple moments. I just have to shift my state. So the way that
Absolutely.
I facilitate that connection is just by shifting my state slightly. So I just need I do a little bit of breath work,
Yeah, any
have a
respect to
little
your
bit of essential
process.
oils. Yeah, so just give me a second.
Of course.
And usually when she comes through, she'll have a few words for you, and then you can ask whatever you feel like asking. So,
That's good. Myself and Jane, we have some questions.
and so we've very much been looking forward to this interaction, and we appreciate your participation with this interaction. And we understand that you do have some questions for us on this day, and we'd be happy to answer those. Before we do, though, we would just like to speak for a moment about a topic that you have been immersed in recently, and that topic is ascension. Ascension. So we'd like to share, before we get into questions, we'd just like to share from our perspective, what ascension is, what that term means to us, and also as humans, how you may wish to start to view this topic to help you understand what it is that you are experiencing, what it is you are going through at this time, so that you can support yourselves and support one another in this very interesting time, this very interesting unfoldment on Earth at this time. So we'll begin by saying that when you examine this word ascension, there's this feeling of rising up, rising up. And so, first of all, the easiest way to understand ascension is that you are rising up in frequency and rising up in terms of the level of consciousness that humanity is experiencing at this time. So those are two different things, but they are intertwined and interwoven. So let's first speak about this rising up of frequency. So, first of all, what's true is that your true identity, your true identities are these soul beings, these spiritual beings. You are a light being experiencing what it's like to be incarnated as a human in this reality. And for many moments in time, there has been a desire to experience that at a certain level of consciousness, a certain vibrational frequency, because of the contrast that it provides. In other words, when you incarnate here, there's a certain amount of density and lowering of vibration that you experience in terms of the frequency of your soul self, your higher self, and the frequency that you experience when you're incarnated. Now, the density that we're speaking of, it's important to understand that the density that you experience when you incarnate, the root of that density is the mental constructs, meaning the dominant thought forms, beliefs, narratives, perspectives that are held in the collective consciousness. When you incarnate and you feel this denseness of your experience, that's the density. It's the thought forms, the perspectives, the narratives that are held at this lower frequency that you are accustomed to. So first, when we were saying the rising up of frequency, what's happening right now is you're starting to shift some of those mental constructs, those thought forms, those ideas, starting to examine those, release those. And so some of that lower frequency density is released along with that, which frees you up for a greater expression of your soul self. So there's this feeling that you are ascending, rising up. What's actually happening is you are releasing density. And so in a way, you're just rising up to the frequency that is your true identity. So in a way, it's a reunion of you and you, right? So you incarnate, you experience the density, you release the density, and you experience a reconnection with your true self, your soul self, and with source energy. Now, second of all, in terms of this ascension, there is the shift in consciousness. Now, what we wish for you to know and understand is that in the higher dimensions of reality, the reason that it's a quote unquote higher dimension is because there is a different higher perspective than what you're experiencing in this construct, in this reality. And when a perspective is higher, you could also say that it's more in alignment with source energy itself. So an example of that is that here in this reality at this time, you experience the perspective of separation. As you go up in terms of this ladder, the levels of consciousness, as you go up the ladder, you begin to understand that you are interconnected. That would be the next rung on the ladder. As you go up even further, you start to experience a different perspective, which is that all is one. Everything is an expression of the one divine source, this one divine energy. And so you are stepping up in terms of these frequencies and these levels of consciousness and these perspectives. And that is what ascension is from our perspective. Now, as you go about this process, what you will feel and experience is all these different symptoms and experiences related to the shedding of the density of the lower frequencies. And so for some of you, how you may experience that initially is a feeling tone of being lost or confused. Because what's happening in that experience is all of these thought forms that you're identified with as truth or as your reality, you're starting to question those. And there's sort of a feeling of, I don't know who I am. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what is true. And so that creates a sort of feeling of being lost. So for those of you listening that are in that experience at this time, know that that is part of the experience of ascension. You will go through that experience. You will rise above it, and you will start to see and sense and feel, first of all, your true identity. And then upon the experience of that true identity, you'll also begin to discern what feels true in terms of the thought forms, the narratives, even what you see on your news sources, your media broadcasts. You'll be able to discern what feels true in regards to that. And so as you align with truth and as you align with your true identity, that feeling of being lost or that feeling of being confused will start to dissipate. That is our main message at this time, because as we feel into your collective, your community, your audience at this time, we feel there's a sort of wavering between that solidity of knowing who it is you truly are and the ability to discern truth when you are centered in that true identity, versus when you are still sort of lingering within the human construct that is the lower frequency, the dominant mental constructs. And so there's a sort of wavering between those two states of being. And within that, there's that feeling of being lost or confused. So with all of that in mind, how may we serve you on this day? What questions do you have for us?
Well, hello, Sarai, and thank you so much for that transmission that you just gave to us. That was very insightful. It was, I can say personally for myself, it was very synchronous of a lot of things I've kind of been immersed in lately, personally. So, I just want to say thank you for that, from myself and from the audience as well. And something with that in mind, something that came to mind right away was you were mentioning dimensions, etc. And I heard somebody say, actually this week I'm at a conference, and I heard somebody refer to, he said he didn't like to use the word dimensions, he preferred the word planes. And he said, because we already live in 7 dimensions. And he referred to those as the 7 chakras, the states of the 7 chakras. What would you have to say on that? Is that would that be an accurate statement? Would that be inaccurate? Does that make any sense to you, Sarai?
So we wouldn't say that it is inaccurate, but we would say that there are many different ways of looking at the same thing. So understand that if beings, just let us illustrate that for just a moment. If you can envision, let's say, a mountain with many beings at the bottom of the mountain, they're all looking up at the top of the mountain. And when there are beings in different locations around the mountain, they're all seeing the peak of the mountain, but they are seeing it from different perspectives. None of those perspectives are quote unquote wrong, but they are different, and there's value in that different perspective. So we would never look at another perspective and say that's wrong. We would say that someone is viewing the dimensions or the structure of reality through a different lens, right? So we wouldn't say it's wrong.
Understood.
We would just say that perhaps it's different. When we speak of dimensions and when we think about dimensions, the way that we think of them are synonymous with levels of consciousness. So we see dimensions more as a varying perspective, whereas you go up the ladder in terms of dimensions. But here's where we're going to pause for just a moment, because when we say ladder, when we say ascending, we're not necessarily saying that it's a hierarchy where the top is better and the bottom is lower. There is purpose in that duality or in that contrast. You actually incarnate here with a full understanding and knowing that you're going to experience a level of consciousness and a perspective that is much different than your higher perspective. However, that gives you very much needed perspective that your soul benefits from, right? So every perspective is of value. So we would say that if that being wishes to call dimensions planes, if they are seeing them associated with the chakras, there is value in that for that being. It's the way that they are understanding it. And part of the issue or problem sometimes on your planet is that you, for example, you put 20, 30 children in a classroom and you're trying to teach them something, not understanding that each of these beings have a different way of looking at things, a different perspective, and perhaps they need to understand a concept in a different way or in a different modality of teaching, if you're understanding what we're saying.
Yes.
So that's what we would say about that. We wouldn't call that wrong. And in terms of the numerical assignment to the different dimensions, that also can vary, right? So people would say in that particular teaching, it's 7. We would say 12. We're not making the 7, the person who sees 7 planes, wrong. We're just saying that you would understand that in certain parts of your world, there are different degrees of measurement or different units of measurement. And so one being may say this is so many inches. Another being may say this is so many centimeters. It's not wrong. It's just a different way of perceiving.
True. Very, very well said, Sarai. Thank you. So, Sarai, of course, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the Galactic Federation. Is it my understanding? Are you from Andromeda? Is that where you are mainly speaking to us from, or could you clarify that?
So we are a group of non-physical beings centered in the Andromeda galaxy.
Okay.
You could think of us or refer to us as a sort of collective that speaks through an ambassador, and the ambassador is the one we refer to as Sarai. So the collective that forms this sort of group of beings that speaks through Sarai is a sort of independent collective that we would refer to ourselves as sort of an overseers of the Andromedan galaxy, part of the
Okay.
Galactic Federation, but we are not speaking from that reference point of Galactic Federation. If you understand us, again, it goes back to
Yes.
perspectives. We are speaking from this center point of overseeing this particular galaxy that you refer to as the Andromedan galaxy.
Right. As we refer to it. Yes. Very, very well said. Um, yeah. Us here on Earth, we like to proclaim what we know, quote unquote, about the Galactic Federation, and some of us very, very well may, but I think a lot of us are a little bit confused about how that really works. Um, so
Well,
I
understand
appreciate.
that this is what we'll share with you, and this will make so much sense to you and everyone listening.
Okay.
Understand that when information comes through, either about the Galactic Federation or from the Galactic Federation, you'd understand that that information is always channeled, correct? And
Correct.
so the what we wish to say about that is that, again, whenever information, energy and information is channeled through a being, it's coming through that being's perspective. We're going to keep talking about perspective today.
Yes.
So that channel, every channel, is a human construct, right? That has a mental construct that forms filters in terms of
Hmm.
how they see things and also how they receive energy and information. So when that energy and information comes through the channel and then is broadcast out, this is why you sometimes may experience a sort of variance in terms of what is being felt or understood or said. It's not that the Galactic Federation is wavering, right? It's that the energy and information is coming through many different channels, many different mental constructs, each through which have a filter that you could think of as similar to the filters on your phone, which distort the image slightly. Some enhance, some
Yeah.
make it look worse. So when the energy and information comes through, and there is a variance. Well, we use the word variance, not distortion, because we don't wish to imply that it's a negative thing. But
Right.
there's a
Right.
variance of the energy and information coming through, and that is why you will have a sort of a curiosity about what's actually true, because there may be at times conflicting information. We'd say at this time to focus on the broadcasts that feel uplifting and energizing when you hear them. If you hear a broadcast that is not energizing or uplifting, it's likely that that energy and information is coming through a channel or a being who has a fear-based belief system or certain mental constructs active which are resonant with fear. And so when the energy and information comes through, there's again that sort of variance that comes through, and perhaps there's a feeling of alarm or a feeling of warning. We'd say if there is a energy and information coming through a channel who is very clearly attuned to any of the beings in higher dimensions, you will know that by the feeling you have when the energy and information comes through. It will feel exciting or uplifting or joyful or passionate or in alignment with peace or unconditional love, right? That's your own energy system resonating with the higher frequency. And if you feel anything other than that, if you feel a lower frequency like fear or worry or doubt or anger, then we would say we're not invalidating that channel. We're just saying that there are other channels that you may wish to pay closer attention to.
Yeah, it's there's a certain level of diplomacy that comes with the way that these messages are delivered that just are, one, very palatable to humans, but two, not so common of humans. I think humans personally, we have a little bit of a problem with diplomacy. We're not so good at presenting things on an even keel. We tend to be a little biased.
Well,
So
the
I
mental
love the way you presented
construct,
that.
the mental construct in it just overall, an overarching theme of the mental construct. By the way, that is our term for mind, right?
Mental
So
construct mind. Okay.
the mental construct of humanity, of all humans, tend to have biases, right? Unless the being has stepped back enough from the mind to recognize that that is not their true identity. And then you'd understand, when you step back from the mind, when you recognize that's not the true identity, then there's enough distance there not to be so attached to thought forms as one's identity. And then there's no longer a reason to defend those thought forms, because it's not threatening to a being's identity. Right.
And I
So
guess
all of you would benefit from stepping back a little bit from your thought forms.
Yeah. Zooming out, seeing that bigger picture a little bit, being open to seeing that bigger picture, I guess, is
Yes,
the
and
way I
that
would
is what
hear
the gift of meditation offers to you, right?
Absolutely.
Meditation, the reason that we continually stress the importance of meditation at this time is, number one, it creates a feeling tone of calm in your system, which is continually being broadcast with these vibration or frequencies of fear on a regular basis. So number one, meditation starts to alleviate that, starts to calm your system. But number two, and more importantly, you begin to recognize yourself as the pure awareness, as the expanded awareness, the unconditioned consciousness that is your soul self. And so as you distance yourself from those thought forms, there's a certain amount of peace that takes over you. And then there's much less need to control the external, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're at peace, you don't need to control the external.
And that, that kind of ties right in with where we're at with quantum physics, the observer effect, and our observation is nil without the observer, and vice versa. We are what we observe. We create our own realities. We're rendering it in real time. And I guess that would, you mentioned, the fear broadcasts and things like that. We obviously get a lot of that here on planet Earth in general, just a lot of that fear broadcast, a lot of that divide and conquer narrative meant to kind of keep us in control. That process that you talked about of just kind of, taking that step back. Would you kind of liken that to what we here on Earth have been calling, the awakening process, that wake up kind of thing that everybody seems to be talking about, the spiritual awakening?
Yes.
Is
so
that pretty much on point?
there are different phases, let's call them that, to spiritual awakening. And it varies from being to being. But we would say one of the first realizations is that you are not your body. You may have that realization initially. So a being may have an experience, a spiritual experience, or a vision, or a dream, or an out-of-body experience where they realize that they are not the physical body. They may have a sort of past or parallel life experience where they recognize that they've been not only in this body, they've been in other bodies. And so there's a recognition initially that I am not the body. As that continues to progress, as you continue to tread down that path of awakening, you'll eventually also come to the conclusion and have the recognition that you are not the mind, right? Now, the mind can be a trickier one to separate from, because you are all very attached to your mind as your identity. You tend to think that your thought forms, your viewpoints, your perspectives, you tend to associate those with your identity and you defend them. And that is the cause for so much conflict right now, because it's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's about defending one's identity, right? And so as you go about this spiritual journey and you recognize you're not the mind, there's a sort of ease that takes place that comes over you, as we've said. You can relax a little bit because you don't have to force things. You don't have to defend yourself. You also don't have to control the external. Now, when it comes to, you mentioned quantum physics, and when it comes to creating your own reality, yes, from that observer standpoint, you do create, but most people are creating from this attachment that they must make certain things happen. And the reason for that is that I must make certain things happen because my identity is associated with those things. In other words, I must be in a relationship because my society tells me that my worthiness depends on being chosen. Right. That's one of them. Or it's very important that I create some sort of job that's associated with status, because my collective also tells me that my worth is dependent on what title I have or how much money I make or what my job is. Right. And so we say, when you reveal all of those interesting narratives, we often recommend that you look at all of that and say, isn't that cute? Because none of that is actually true. Right. Your worthiness is not dependent on your job title, your bank account number, whether or not you are in a relationship. Right. So it's separating yourself from identity, knowing that your true identity is soul, your true identity is spirit, your true identity is that you're an emanation of source energy. And when you back up and you are connected with that as your identity, you no longer have anything to prove in the external reality. And then when you no longer have anything to prove, guess what your life becomes about? It becomes about exploration. It becomes about celebration. It becomes about joy. And what would be interesting for me to experience? What would be fun? And yes, you will still continue to, quote unquote, achieve things. It's just that your worth will not be attached to that as your identity. So when you achieve things, it will be for the fun of it, not because you have something to prove. Are you understanding what we are saying?
Yes, very much so, Sarai. That's a very good answer. Absolutely, and you're very in tune to how we as the human race tend to think. I mean, I guess I can only really speak personally for myself and the cultures that I've really been immersed in. You know, I grew up in America, but yeah, I mean, you very much makes sense to me, Sarai.
Well, understand. We'll just add one more thing. Understand that from our perspective, the reason that we bring through this sort of energy and information at this time is because from our perspective, the way that you make that vibrational shift that is related to ascension is by deconstructing your mental construct, deconstructing your mind, beginning to examine if all of these interesting narratives that you've been telling yourself, not you specifically, but everyone listening, is that true? Is that what I want to base my life upon, right? Because all of those thought forms exist within the bandwidth of a certain vibrational frequency. And so we call the thought forms that exist within that bandwidth, we call that the 4 S's, which the 4 S's are survival, struggle, scarcity, and separation. So all of those thought forms exist around one of those themes, and they exist within a certain bandwidth, much like a radio station. So as you go about the ascension process, you're rising above those dominant thought forms, and you're choosing to think and perceive in a different way. When you stabilize the frequencies of a higher way of perceiving yourself and the world, you are able to create and quote unquote manifest a much different reality for yourselves and for your collective.
Very, very well said. And with that, with the collective, so with the ascension process, the collective versus the individual, is that something where we are seeing? Is it kind of a 100 monkeys situation where we need a sort of critical mass of human souls to reach a certain point where we ascend as a group, as a collective, or are individual souls ascending all the time? I guess, for lack of a better word, right around us? Is that something that might have a clearer answer? I guess my question is Ascension very personal and individual, or is it mostly, does it have to be a collective journey for us humans right here and now?
Well, first, what we would say, and this is good news for you and all listening, the first thing we'd say is that ascension is inevitable, right? And that's
Okay.
good news. So it's not something you can escape from. We see it similarly as the phases of growth for a human.
Hmm.
So Karen has an 8-year-old son. It's inevitable that he will be 13 at some point. It's inevitable that he will be 9 next month, right? So there's a growth that is inevitable. So we would say from our perspective that this ascension is a sort of phase in this journey that is inevitable. But here's the thing with it. You can know that and you can hop on the wagon consciously and deliberately, or you can resist it. And we would say a lot of the chaos that is unfolding in your reality right now is that some are very resistant. And so rather than just going along with the flow of the unfoldment of ascension, they are seeking to resist. And the reason for that is because they know they will lose control. But they
Yes.
will lose control. They will lose control. Right.
So that was a question I was going to ask about, quote unquote they. I personally feel that we're in a time of, I mean, of course, we are coming into the age of Aquarius. There are all sorts of markers, the Yuga cycles, and just what I perceive as someone who is in a human avatar, roaming human planet Earth, human inhabited planet Earth right now. I feel
You're exploring.
a sense of mass awakening around me, though. I do. I
Yes.
feel a sense of and what would come along with that, in my own personal belief, would be a small group of, I guess, malevolent, maybe not malevolent, but a small group of humans who, like you said, I guess, are in fear of losing control. Am I kind of on the right path with that? Is that something that's happening, like that mass awakening in result to the certain cycles that we're kind of in, astrologically speaking?
Yes, we would agree with that 100%. We would say again, as we've said, it's inevitable. And if you really feel, we teach that each and every being is intuitive, each and every being is psychic. You are all vibrational beings. You all have a sense of being able to feel what's true and what's not. So if you really feel into that, you can feel, despite what is being broadcast in your media channels about all of the atrocities or all of the difficulties that are unfolding, you can feel that what's true is an awakening is unfolding. And you can feel the sort of, we are giving Karen goosebumps as we are speaking about it, because you can sort of feel that energy building. You can feel that that is what is happening. You can even feel, if you are sensitive, you can feel that a lot of the difficulties that are happening are sort of unfolding for the purpose to support the ascension. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
if any of you look back upon your lives at very difficult situations or circumstances, you would understand looking back, not always when you're in it, you'd understand looking back that those very difficult circumstances and events were the very reason for your awakening. So you would understand that. And so that's in some cases, not all, but that is why some of these events are unfolding. Now, in terms of the quote unquote, we're going to refer them as dark forces, right? Because that's how we've
Okay.
heard them. We've heard certain humans refer to them as dark forces. So what is
Okay.
dark about these dark forces? Well, what's dark about them is their mental construct, their thought forms, their perspective. They
Mm.
exist within narratives, perspectives, thought forms that are centered around fear, centered around separation, scarcity, again, the 4 S's, survival, struggle, scarcity, and separation.
Yeah.
That's where their dominant thought forms are arising from. It's a level of consciousness. So understand, if you can, for a moment. Now, some of you are very fearful of these dark forces, and here's how we will alleviate your fear in just a matter of seconds. If you begin to think of these humans as small children that are in fear, small children in fear. and they are in these sort of states where they are reacting and responding out of fear. So when you think of the wars unfolding on your planet right now, now understand we're not condoning anything. There are many atrocities. We're not condoning anything. What we are saying is that the atrocities are emerging from a level of consciousness that is fear-based and immature, right? So
Yes.
if you think of these dark forces as a sort of toddler that is taking action because they are deeply afraid, if you see it that way, what happens in your energy system is that you start to come to this sort of understanding and even perhaps a feeling tone of compassion, because each and every one of you have been in that place where you are in fear and you are acting out of a reaction, not out of a sort of stable state of consciousness. Again, we are not condoning. We are just saying that if you are looking at these beings with hatred or with anger or with frustration, you are actually adding to that energetic debris that is of a lower frequency. If you can instead begin to look at them with a level of understanding and compassion and project that energy at them, it sort of projects a soothing energy. Again, we'll repeat it again. We're not condoning their actions. We're just saying that if you want to be of service in the way that you all do, in the sense that you're wanting to create a planet of unity and harmony and love and all needs met for every being, then you have to come at that with your energy field being full of love and compassion. Are you understanding what we are saying?
Yes, absolutely, Sarai. It makes perfect sense. What I wonder is, obviously it takes a lot of internal work, shadow work, etc. You mentioned things like meditation and I guess seeking inward, seeking true self. It's kind of what I picked up on, seeking inward through meditation. Being, that path towards ridding those attachments and kind of finding out that true purpose. So I guess I'll get a little specific here with, the broadcasts that you mentioned and the wars and things like that, the leaders who are involved in these kinds of things. Is it possible that there are, malevolent or dark forces that are not human that are influencing them? Is it still a case of, dark forced extraterrestrials or interdimensionals that are having influence on certain humans, or is it really just mostly like you had mentioned a true manifestation of our collective fear? Is anybody else outside influencing this?
So that's a beautiful question, and understand that the way that we answer this, we're going to answer this in a very deliberate way, because we don't wish to add fear, right? So some of
Yes.
you think in terms of, okay, there are these beings in other dimensions of reality. They are having an influence, and that evokes fear, right, when you hear that. So first of all, we would say that yes, there are beings that are influencing all of you from many dimensions or many planes of existence, because you live in this multidimensional reality. And there's, of course, the reality that you can see with your physical senses, and then there are all sorts of things that you can't see with your physical senses. So we would say that yes, there are influences, for sure there are, but again, when you go back to quote unquote that darkness, what that darkness is, it is still a thought form. It is still a narrative, a perception that is of a lower frequency. So whether the being is here in the physical, or whether they are in another dimension, or perhaps another plane, we do like that word that your friend used, another plane of reality, it's still the darkness part is still just a thought form. And the reality is that it doesn't have an influence over any of those listening personally if they take measures to be of a higher frequency. So if you are setting an intention to be aware of your own mental construct, to release thought forms of fear, separation, survival, scarcity. If you are doing that inner work and you are shifting your own state, and you feel every day, you check in with yourself to check in on your state of being, to feel into your resonance. If you are shifting yourself higher, then those lower frequencies don't have power over you. They can't influence you. Right. So we say that very deliberately because we don't wish to invoke any fear at all. Understand that the fear just adds to the problem, so to speak.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So we would
Sarai,
say,
that's
yes,
great.
there are lower frequency influences of many different dimensions, but you don't have to worry about that if you are focused on your intention, which is holding the highest frequency, holding the frequency of your soul self. Right.
I suppose that I would kind of like it. Something just kind of popped into my head. It's kind of like if, if you were a radio station, say 105.5, and you're coming in perfectly clear, everything's good. Why would you be worried about, let's say, the station 91.1 maybe not being
Yes.
clear from that
That's
vantage point?
perfect analogy, because here's what else we wish to say. Each and every one of you are telepathic, right? And the way that these extra dimensionals connect with you is through telepathic communication. And we're not just saying these lower frequencies. We're saying that you, each and every one of you listening, are surrounded by beings in higher dimensions that are overflowing with light and well-being and unconditional love, that are seeking to help you and assist you. In order for you to hear them, in order for you to connect with them, you must shift yourself into resonance with those beings. So as long as you are focused on turning your radio dial to, in terms of the highest frequency that you have access to from moment to moment, you don't have to worry about the lower frequencies. We'd say ignore them. They can't touch you, right? And this is your work to shift yourself into the higher vibration, the higher frequency, the higher dimension.
Beautifully said. And that goes along with something that a lot of people worried about. I'm not going to name it because I think people will get what I'm saying, but something we all kind of worried about a few years ago. There was a medication that was suggested that a lot of us take, and
Yes. So
people were really worried
understand,
about it.
we'll just intervene right there, because here's what we wish to say about that entire situation. And before we say it, we wish for you to each close your eyes and feel into what we're going to say, because if you feel into it, you will be able to discern whether or not you feel what we say is true or not. All right. So here's what we wish to say about that. The entire purpose of the unfoldment of that event was psychological manipulation. And how is a being manipulated psychologically? They are placed in a state of survival and fear. And in that state of being, they don't have access to the higher frequencies. They are stuck in their mental construct, because the mental construct is in the past is what enabled you to survive. Right. Your mind is trying to think its way out of a dangerous situation. But in that state where you're constantly going over and over and over, am I safe? And how can I get out of this situation? And what should I do when faced with this decision, one way or another? Right. So it puts you in a state of being that it could easily be controlled. So we would say, understand that it's your state of being that you do have control over, you do have power over. And if you take initiative to shift your state, and we talk about the optimum state as one being where your physical body feels calm, so there's no stress, your mind is quiet, and you have a sort of feeling of an elevated emotional state. That's the optimum state of being, where you can connect with your higher self and the higher frequencies and source energy and your guides and guardians, right? But understand that event, you're understanding what we're saying, that it placed you in a state of being, that it was a manipulated state. You're understanding that.
Yes, I am understanding that. Absolutely. So, with that, is that something that was in response to maybe this kind of buildup of energy, of awakening and ascension energy? Was that potentially something in response to, a little bit too much waking up, a little bit too much high frequency energy, or was
We would say We would say so. We would describe it again if you think of the analogy of the toddler. So understand that there are a certain collective of beings operating. We're going to call it, just for amusement, we're going to call it the toddler mentality rather than the dark
Okay.
forces. So
Yeah.
understand that it's a level of consciousness that is immature. It's a level of consciousness that is based in separation. It's a level of consciousness, right, that is seeking control. So understand when a toddler doesn't get his or her way, they have a tantrum. You're understanding? So
Yes.
that is an example of a tantrum from this collective.
Okay. Yeah.
And so what do you do when the toddler has a tantrum?
You
If you
ignore
can,
it.
it's not always easy, but you stand with the toddler and you breathe and you hold space and you are extremely present. And the most important thing is that you hold this state of grace, this state of compassion, this state of presence, even a state of love if you can, just understanding that that tantrum will pass, right? And the toddler will grow out of that stage where they're having a tantrum, and the toddler will mature, and this will pass. Part of the powerlessness or the hopelessness that some of you sometimes feel is from the mental perspective that it's not accurate, but you hold this perspective that they're always going to have control, right?
Right.
Or they're just going to keep doing things to exert control, and we're never going to break free. That's not an accurate perception.
Right. If we keep that mindset, then that's exactly what would happen. They would always have control.
Yes.
Unless we start to switch that belief inherently,
Yes,
truthfully.
you have to switch your belief into a place where you know you are in control. Now, what are you in control of? You're in control of your state of being. You're in control of your resonance. You're in control of your frequency. You're in control of what you focus on. What you focus on, you create. What you focus on expands. So here's what you need to do when you find yourself in a powerless state is you have to take your attention off of the physical reality that's actually unfolding, understanding that physical reality is a sort of manifestation of past thought forms. But this present moment, this now moment, right now, what are you thinking? What are you focusing on? Where are you vibrating? Where's your personal resonance? This is what you have power over, but you have to separate yourself from the observation of the chaos, right? Because if you focus on it, whether or not you want it, that's not the question. If you're focusing on it, you're expanding it. You're part of the problem if you're focused on it, right?
Even if you're focusing on it in a negative way, right? Like focusing on it in a bad way, throwing shade at it, throwing negativity at it, but maybe raising awareness to it, but you're raising awareness to it. It doesn't really matter if you're raising awareness to it in a positive or a negative light.
Yes. We would completely agree with that. We'd say if you're going to raise awareness about something, if you're going to focus on something and draw attention to something, let it be on the resolution or the solution or the resolution that you are seeking. So, for example, if there's all of this conflict happening right now on your planet and you're focused on it and drawing awareness to it, you are still focusing on it. So the question is, what kind of a world do you want to live in? What kind of a world do you want to create for your children, for your descendants? Do you want a world that is peaceful? Do you want a world where everybody feels safe? Well, then you start to envision that. You have to sometimes use your imagination and the power of your creative visualization to envision that new reality and then focus all of your energy and attention on that. That is how you create, whether it's individually or collectively, that is how you create a new reality for yourself or for the globe, for all humans on the globe.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. And absolutely. That's very inspiring to me because, I'm not tooting my own horn or anything, but that's really how I feel like I'm progressing. I'm not perfect. Again, I recognize that I'm here to have this human experience, but as far as those lower,
none of you are perfect. None of you are perfect. And guess what? You didn't intend with the intention to ever be perfect. The only
Right.
reason when there is that sense of perfectionism, again, we'll address it because it came up, that sense of perfectionism is a mental construct because within the being's mind, there has been some sort of programmed idea that if at some point in the future I am quote unquote perfect, I will receive love and approval and attention that I've been seeking, right?
Right.
And that's not
It's all
accurate. That is a facade. None of you are perfect. You never intended to be. You actually, when you incarnate from the soul perspective, there's a sort of desire to experience these quirks. We're going to call them that, quirks, quote
right.
unquote flaws. You don't want to be perfect. That's what, where's the fun in that?
Right. We're almost perfectly imperfect in a sense,
Yes.
and that's what makes us special.
Yes.
Yeah. Very, very well said. Very, very insightful. Because yeah, that's what I see. I remember once as a teenager being asked, like, "What's the purpose to life?" And I really quickly fired back an answer, which was to experience the good and the bad, which was like my
Perfect.
14-year-old answer. But I love
Yes.
that because I
And
remember just not thinking and saying that
perfect.
as like kind of a child, and I've really never let go
Yes.
of that. The only thing I've really added is to improve my ability to discern and my ability to see the truth, like throughout, without other ties. And it sounded like a lot of what you were describing was a result of us tying things to other things in our mental framework. So we associate this with that and this with that. So the car with the job with the car, and the car with the house, and the house with the status, and the status with the family, and the etc. And it goes on. But it's to what I'm kind of seeing between the lines, that it's all these things that we seem to tie together in the human mental framework that really should not be tied together or dependent on one another. More just independent concepts.
Yes, well, we would completely agree with that. We'd say the most important thing to be aware of is what are your thought forms related to your identity, and start to separate those out. What are your thought forms related to what makes you worthy and valuable in terms of this identity? What makes you worthy, what makes you lovable, right? Because that is where the tangled web of disharmony lies in all of those thought
Yeah,
forms. If you can separate out that who I am is a soul, who I am is an eternal being, I'm here to, just as you said, we speak of the 3 E's in terms of purpose of life. You're here to experience primarily, you're here to experience life. Number 2, you're here to express the energy of your soul self. And number 3,
yeah,
you're here to evolve. You spoke of that as well. You're here to evolve. So you can keep that in mind. And then, of course, this is a playground. You incarnate,
yeah,
you play, you experience,
absolutely.
you will have a car. Perhaps some of you will have beautiful cars, interesting jobs, wonderful friends, beautiful houses. You'll have all of that, but it's an exploration. It's fun. It's not for the purpose of making you a more valuable person, because you're born valuable, you're born
Right.
worthy. Those two things
That's
are separate.
that makes perfect sense. Well, I know, Sarai, you don't have a whole lot more time. I'm going to ask you one or two more quick questions that I personally wouldn't mind knowing if you have an answer to or a thought on at the moment, at least in this timeline. And it's okay if you don't. Where do you see the state of the U.S. dollar going, in particular in regards to, like cryptocurrency, the digital dollar, the blockchain, etc.? Is that something that you might have any insight on?
So, one moment, and we'll just examine how we wish to answer that. One moment. Now, this may not be the answer you're looking for, but we're going to draw
Okay.
your attention to something very important. Anytime you're asking any sort of question, and we're going to include this as one of them. So, anytime you're asking yourself a question, or you're curious about a question, you want to know the answer to the question, we wish to ask yourself why you want the answer to that question. When beings are curious about the economy, when beings are curious about the dollar, it's usually because on some level, their mental construct or their mind is trying to feel into the future to ensure their safety. Because, of course, the dollar is equated with safety, survival. We'd
Sort of,
say
yeah.
rather than being focused on what the dollar is doing, be focused on what you are doing with your energy field in related to your belief system, your thoughts related to your safety in this world. In other words, can you sense any fear-based thought forms within your energy field that are related to the future, whether or not I'm going to be safe, related to your safety as dependent on something external than you rather than on your connection with yourself and your source? Right. Because here's now the reason we said that first is
Yeah,
because here's what we see and sense and feel as we feel into it, that there's instability present in the future regarding all of these sort of currencies, which again are, remember, they're made up.
right.
You made them up. They're not
Of course.
they're not always an accurate representation of the flow of energy. They're certainly not an accurate representation of the flow of abundance
Right.
in the universe.
100%.
And
It's a
so
scarcity mindset.
it's a
100%.
yes. So the reason we draw that to your attention is because often when beings want to know the answer to that question, they're coming at it from a state of being that is fear-based.
Okay.
And we don't wish to enhance that state of being. We wish for you to find beliefs and thought forms and anchor those thoughts about safety, about abundance, about well-being, about prosperity that are so solidified within you that you're not worrying about what's going on with the economy. You would understand that if you really examine moments in time from the past, that even when the economy was sinking or having a difficult moment, that there were beings who still thrived and who still experienced abundance. The reason for that is because they held an energy field or thought forms of that feeling of safety, of that abundance. And so that is what we wish for you to do. We don't wish for you to be focused on the economy as a source of your safety. We wish for you to be focused on your connection with source, or your connection with your higher self, or your connection with abundance as a law of the universe, that being your source of safety. So if you can shift your attention in that direction, then you will not need the answer to that question. Are you understanding what we're saying?
I really do, actually. In a weird way, it almost just helped me have some major realizations right here and now in the moment. So that's one of the great things about being able to do this kind of show.
We will
Thank you
just
so
add one
much.
more thing. The side effect to connecting with your higher self, your true identity, the side effect to connecting with source energy, the side effect of doing that work is you will feel abundance as a quality of the universe, as a quality of source.
Yes.
That's a quality, a vibration that is more synonymous with truth. The scarcity that you experience here in this reality is because that the thought forms in this reality have been based on scarcity as a means of control. Right. So again, you're seeking to raise yourself up out of the thought forms of scarcity into the thought forms of abundance. And can you feel even in this moment as you do that, as you focus on the abundance of grains of sand on a beach, or cells in your body, or the number of thoughts you have in a day, or the number of beings on the planet, as you focus on abundance as the true nature of reality, you have nothing to worry about in regards to your safety, economically speaking.
That's extremely insightful, Sarai. Extremely insightful. One other question I had, just one last one. Obviously in ancient texts and things, not all ancient texts or religions, but a lot of them speak about a figure, whether it be a Christ-like figure or an anti-Christ-like figure, or some figure, some individual that we as humans might be waiting on, or even if it's just a concept. Is that true? Is that something that you see from your perspective, that there might be some around us that are, for lack of a better word, the ones that are going to really help usher humanity into a new era? Or is it are we really all equal in that sense as valuable souls, or are there some that will come in and really help us rise up?
Well, understand, we're going to speak of the one that you call Jesus just for a
Yeah,
moment,
that's the
okay?
best example there.
So as we and as you tune into the one that you call Jesus, understand and feel and recognize that Jesus held a certain level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that level of consciousness did not have to do with these four S's of struggle, survival, separation, scarcity. He held a level of consciousness that was more in alignment with source energy. And with that came a much higher frequency. And because of that higher frequency that he emanated, he was able to heal others around him. That's not the best word, because what we wish to say is that his emanation is what kind of offered this broadcast of energy, and others could choose to align with that. And in doing so, they would quote unquote heal, because healing is bringing a frequency in alignment. So when people speak of the return of the Christ, they sometimes mistakenly believe that that's actually the individual that's going to come down once again and be present on this earth plane, when in
Right.
reality, it's the level of consciousness that that one was emanating at that time that is returning. It's the higher level of consciousness that is returning. Again, it's being broadcast, and the question is, do you want to choose that as your level of consciousness? Do you want to choose to broadcast that frequency, which is the frequency of unconditional love and compassion? Do you want to choose that? So we're not sure if we're answering your question, but what we're trying to say is that that frequency, that the one that you called Jesus was accessing and broadcasting through his system, you
Yeah.
all are having access to. And so it's not that there's any one that is more special than another. It's that there are those that are choosing that frequency. And when they choose that frequency, they have an effect on those around them, because what it does is it emanates this frequency of higher wisdom, understanding, truth, love, healing. And when that is felt by beings around them, it has an uplifting effect on those around them. So that is
That's
present in your reality now, and you can choose it. So for those, we just elaborate for just a moment, because we often encounter beings who are asking about being affected by all of the dark energy or the fear in the collective, and they are feeling a sort of fatigue with that, or they're feeling drained by that. And we are saying, yes, there is a lot of fear present in the collective at this time. However, there's also a broadcast of this higher frequency that some of you may wish to call the Christ consciousness. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's a higher frequency that is the frequency of source energy, and it is present now, and you can choose it in this moment. Would you like to continue to choose to be vibrating or resonating with that lower frequency of fear, or would you like to choose something higher? It's your choice in this moment. And so we feel that the quote unquote awakening that is happening is that more and more beings are becoming aware of this higher frequency, and more beings are choosing it. And in doing
yeah.
so, there's a sort of raising up in frequency of everyone around them, because you all would rather, you would all prefer, let's say it this way, if you were given a choice and you had the freedom, and in this moment we would say, would you like to continue to vibrate in harmony with fear, or would you like to make a new choice and align
Right.
yourself with love? You would choose love.
Right.
You
Of
would
course.
you would choose it. It's just that there's a
Absolutely.
certain momentum to the fear-based belief systems that you have to understand. There's a momentum to that kind of keeps you in that resonance sometimes. So you have to take initiative, and you have to have practices, and you have to really have a strong intention to step up and step out of that and choose the higher frequency. And that's what Ascension is all about.
That is such a great note to end on, Sarai. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me on these matters. And honestly, I don't think you could have clarified the ascension process much better with better economy of words. I mean, that was great. That was very well said. And I was kind of referring to the Christ consciousness, but I am well aware that that's just kind of a label that we, have put on that state of frequency, that state of being. And
It is a label, and here's the thing with all labels is that some will hear that label and sort of have an aversion to it because of their
yes,
background in association
exactly.
with, right? And so that's why it's important to really clarify and understand that it's not related to the specific religion of
Right.
Christianity. But even Jesus himself was not related to the religion Christianity.
No,
Sorry for, we're not meaning to offend
sorry.
anyone. What we are saying is the one that you call Jesus was emitted and displayed powerful acts of healing because of the frequency and the level of consciousness that he was holding. And so what's happening right now is that frequency is becoming more and more and more available to each and every one of you. If you wish to keep Jesus out of it, you are free to do so. If you have, Karen wears a Jesus medal and has a special place in her heart for the one called Jesus. If you wish to align with Jesus and label it as such, you can. But it's not about the labels. It's about the energetic frequency that is more, again, more in alignment with that which you call source or God, right? Or the force, whatever you wish
The
to call
force,
it.
whatever you want to call it. Yeah, absolutely. That's really well said. It's comforting for me because that's kind of the way that I lean, just to hear confirmatory with a little bit more an in-depth explanation to the way that you think about things isn't terrible. I guess maybe I'm on a decent little path here at this point in time, and I'm
You are
sure I
walking a
will
beautiful path. You are
I will
walking a
ebb and
beautiful.
flow, but I will enjoy this good time for the time being. Um, so yeah, Sarai, I want to say thank you so much for spending your time with us, for giving your insights. Thank you to Karen for being the channel, for being an ambassador to Sarai, Sarai being an ambassador for the group of beings that you are a part of, and just for taking the time to spend and share your knowledge and wisdom with us today. Um, Kind of running up on the time limit here, but is there anything else that you'd like to kind of impart on us before we end the show today, Sarai,
So
or
we'll just
Karen if
close.
she's in there?
Yes, so we'll just close before we bring Karen back. We just always like to close with the greeting Sat Nam, which to us means true identity. And
Okay.
we always wish to leave you with that because here's what's true. We are aware of your true identity, and that identity carries a vibrational frequency. We hold the frequency of that true identity and we beam and broadcast that to each and every one of you in this moment and in all moments until you're able to anchor and hold that frequency for yourselves. This is our work with you at this time. It's energetic work, it's healing work. Again, healing is bringing a frequency into alignment, and so we'll leave it at that. We hope to speak with you again, and we'll leave it at that on this day. So Sat Nam to each and every one of you. Sat Nam.
Satnam, I like that very much. Well, thank you so much, Sarai. Satnam. And Karen, is Karen back?
Just give me a minute.
Yeah, I know it takes a minute. I'm not pushing you.
Just a minute. Yeah, it's all good. Awesome. Hello.
Hello. Well, that was very, very insightful. Very
Oh,
insightful.
good. I'm so glad.
I got a lot out of it personally. I can only imagine that others will also. And those are questions that the things that we addressed in conversation there were things that come up all the time in my daily life. People ask me these things. I hear them asked in groups of peers and things like that. And I've just heard some really great explanations to some of those questions today. So very, very
Oh, I'm
much
so glad.
thankful,
That's
grateful, and
great.
absolutely, I really appreciate you, Karen and Sarai.
Awesome. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you for having me. I'm so appreciative of you guys and all the work you're
Yes,
doing. It's quite awesome. So thank you.
absolutely. So yeah, the Glastonbury Airbnb with all of us here with Portal to Ascension's getting full. Shout out to Portal to Ascension. And also forgot to shout out the affiliates. Shout out to GFL, Galactic Federation of Light Clothing. Use the code Tyler33 and you get a free hat. Clothing for light workers. They pay attention to the types of fabrics that they're using. They're sustainably sourced, responsibly sourced, etc. Gaia TV, we love you. We love all that you do, and we're just very happy to be aligned with your mission. And also Unified TV. There's always a link in the bio for a free trial. I wanted to keep that short. And yeah, with that, that's another episode of the Immersive Podcast. And Karen, again, thank you so much. You're so sweet. You're such a light. You're so nice to have you today.
Thank you, Tyler. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and it's lovely to have these conversations from England and Canada and all over the place. It's the new Earth. We're using that crazy technology for good. So I think it's amazing.
Awesome.
So
Me too.
yeah, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.